Will injuries impact the way that the Baltimore Ravens draft in 2022? We talk about that and much more next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. And we're here back at it again on a Wednesday, which means it is our mailbag episode. And we have a ton of mailbag questions to dive into today. 3 segments worth of mailbag questions, talking about free agency, talking about the draft, talking about Ravens personnel, and again, so much more. So thank you to everybody who did submit those mailbag questions. We'll talk about if injuries are going to impact the way the Ravens will draft in the second segment, talk about best picks at number 14, etc., etc. So tons of that to dive into. Before we get into it all, though, if you're here on YouTube, so you see my face in my background in video form, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. We put out Daily Ravens content 5 days per week. So if you like Daily Ravens content on every weekday, a fresh perspective of the team, the happenings of everything, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It is free to subscribe on YouTube, and it does help me out a lot. So thank you to everybody who has already subscribed. And if you are subscribing in the future, I thank you in advance. But we're also in audio form. That's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Thank you to all the audio listeners. So with all that being said, let's dive into it right now. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter at CashRecord34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. But now let's dive into the content, starting off with our first mailbag question from Benji, who asked, do you think the sack numbers will go up now that Wink Martindale is gone? And so this is an interesting question, because if we were talking about, is the scheme better, or will the scheme be better from Don Martindale to Mike Macdonald, we just don't know yet. I mean, Mike Macdonald has not coached a game as a defensive coordinator of the Ravens so far. Based off initial reactions to what I think Macdonald will do with the scheme, keeping some of the aggressive nature while also just being a bit, I feel like, more natural with the defense in general. If we're talking about scheme fit and that going in and translating to sacks, I'll say yeah. I think the sacks will increase, but it does depend on the personnel. If the Ravens were to go into the season with the personnel they have right now at this very moment, which is Tyus Bowser coming off a torn Achilles, Odafe Owe coming off of shoulder surgery after missing some games with a foot injury, Dalen Hayes, who missed almost his entire rookie season, and Jalen Ferguson, the answer is no, right? I mean, they have to get better in the personnel department if they want the sacks to increase. That's just, it's a fact. It's one of their biggest needs. So taking that fact into account, assuming the Ravens can bring in like a quality young star type player or one of the better edge rushers on the market, coupled by a bit of depth, I think, yes, there is a very realistic chance the Ravens will end the 2022 season with more sacks than they had in 2021, but also maybe the most sacks that they've had in the past 5 years, because in the Don Martindale era, the sack numbers were always kind of like in the middle to the bottom half of the league. Baltimore, I believe, was tied for 22nd in sacks last season, all in all throughout the entire league. So that's not where you want to be generally. You know, if you're in the top 12 in sacks, I think that's kind of, I'm okay with that. I think that is where the Ravens defense, if they can get into the top 12, they can catapult themselves up there. That will help out a ton. But based off of scheme, the hopeful personnel the Ravens will be able to get, I feel like, yes, the sack numbers can definitely go up in 2022. Next, we have a question from Ofid Defoe, who asks, what is the number one need, cornerback or edge? Thank you for the good work. You're welcome. Thank you for saying I do good work. I appreciate that. But the number one need for the Ravens, corner or edge, these are 1, 2 in my opinion. I'm saying edge is number one, though, because when you look at what the Ravens have at both positions at the moment, I think the cornerback position, you have star power. You have Marlon Humphrey. You have Marcus Peters. How both will respond from their season-ending injuries is, it remains to be seen, obviously. But at the edge outside linebacker position, you have Odafe Owe and then Tyus Bowser, who was recovering from that Achilles injury. You don't have much else. I feel like the Ravens, if there is a Jermaine Johnson who falls to 14, I am running that card in. Obviously, the exceptions to maybe the edge situation is if those top 4 edge rushers, so Aiden Hutchinson, Trayvon Walker, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Jermaine Johnson all go in the top 13. And then you have Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley go in the top 13 as well. Then you're running into, all right, is this pick a wide receiver? Is it a defensive tackle? Who is it? Who's the pick? So you got to look at those situations. But for me, I think the Ravens at the quarterback position just need some solid depth outside of Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, whereas at the edge position, they kind of do need a star-type player. Not saying Afe can't develop into a star. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But if they can bring in a veteran, maybe like Jadeveon Clowney or someone of that nature, then I think they can draft some guys as well that would help out. But for me, the number one need on this team at the moment is an edge. And then number 2 followed is a cornerback. So those are my thoughts on the edge versus corner debate. And now a question from Matt Carter asks, is Jermaine Johnson or Jordan Davis the better pick at 14, assuming both are there? The more I think of it, the more I like the Owe Johnson combination. With that said, Jordan Davis might be too good to pass up. Which direction would you go and why? And so, yeah, it's kind of like I talked about with the last question. I'm personally going Jermaine Johnson. That's not a slight on Jordan Davis. I think Jordan Davis is a great player. But the signing of Calais Campbell, we talked a bit about this yesterday if you want to check out that show. But the signing of Calais Campbell kind of puts the need of a defensive lineman down a rung or two. Not saying it's not a need, because, I mean, it is. Calais Campbell's not a long-term solution. Michael Pierce, not a long-term solution. Derek Wolfe, same thing. So if the Ravens feel like Jordan Davis is this like generational guy who's going to play for 10 seasons and be utterly dominant, he's going to be in Baltimore, all that, then I wouldn't be shocked if they took Jordan Davis. But I just feel like for right now, with what the Ravens have on the defensive line, they do have Campbell, they do have Pierce, Wolfe, Matabike, Washington. At the edge position, you're banking on the return of Bowser. So I think Johnson gives you that NFL readiness with the run defense and the pass rushing ability. He is great in the run game, can set the edge, very disruptive there. Also in the pass rushing areas, he wins with his athleticism. He can convert speed to power. And I just feel like Johnson would be the better fit based off of need, based off of overall player. But if Johnson is gone, the 4 edge rushers are gone, the 2 top corners are gone, etc., I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens took a Jordan Davis to shore up that defensive line, give them a very deep defensive line room. And then once Calais Campbell, he's out and Michael Pierce is out and Derek Wolfe is out, then you have a dominant player who cannot be single blocked in Jordan Davis. So it's a very interesting debate about just who to pick where and everything. But I feel like, to me, if it was Johnson versus Davis, I'm personally taking Jermaine Johnson at the moment. And our final question here before we head into our first break is from Y, who asks, do you believe in the front office's system of operating in the LJ era? So spending big on defense only, free agency, draft offensive talent early / bank on potential? Or do you think the lack of value placed on proven offensive talent will ultimately bite them in the butt in the postseason? This is an interesting debate, and I've seen it debated, all across Twitter and Ravens wherever's. This is a situation that the Ravens have really put themselves into, which is, especially if we're talking about the defense, let's talk about the secondary first, where the Ravens have invested tons and tons and tons of money into that secondary. And you can look at the roster right now. Marlon Humphrey on a near $100 million contract. They just signed Marcus Williams to that 5-year, $70 million contract. Marcus Peters is not on a cheap deal, right? So they invested a ton of that money. In terms of the actual question, do I think that the actual operation of that whole thing is do I believe in that? I feel like I'm fine with it. Maybe if there was a little more balance. I mean, personally, the center position is one where, hey, look, there's a J.C. Tretter out there, right? The Ravens historically have not invested in that position. J.C. Tretter is by far the best center left on the market and one of the better ones in the NFL. Now, I don't really know what's going on with his market right now. He's not signed, and there hasn't really been any rumblings, but I feel like that's a position where you could maybe take some of that money from the defense and put it in to the offense. And soon enough, this is going to transition. This is not just going to be the whole Lamar Jackson era they're going to spend on defense and not spend on offense, because eventually they're going to have to pay Lamar Jackson. They're going to have to pay Marquise Brown if they so choose. Mark Andrews has that extension. Ronnie Stanley has that extension. So the money that's in the defense right now, where we're seeing all this money in the defense, and we're talking about why are they investing all that money, soon is going to go back into their own offensive players. But the other part of the question, I feel like if they spend a little money on a veteran receiver, right, like a Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones. I'm not saying they have to give out a $170 million contract to a wide receiver or anything, but just, get him that talent, get him that help. I understand investing in the offensive line, I think, is very big. They did that with Morgan Moses. Again, that's not a huge deal, but I feel like with the offense versus the defense, where you're spending money in free agency, usually you're not signing quarterbacks, right? You that franchise guy you're drafting. Wide receivers, usually those guys don't hit the market. That's either you're trading for or drafting. Tight ends, there are some that hit the market and they're very good, but usually you're drafting those guys or trading for them. Offensive linemen, usually you're drafting those guys or signing them to big money deals. That's the position. I feel like if the Ravens got a blue chip guy on the offensive line, that would be the position where I'm spending in free agency. If I'm the Ravens, then maybe that takes out from a little bit of the, corner position, inside linebacker position, defensive line, whatever it may be. So if they were to get a blue chip offensive lineman to pair on that offensive line, and then that goes out of the defense, they can draft some of those players. I'm all on board for that personally. So I don't hate what the Ravens do in terms of their spending there. I mean, I think it is a fine strategy, definitely, and it is, for the most part, worked out for him. Obviously, there have been some things that have not worked out. It has not definitely not been perfect, but I feel like that's, if that's what they value, that's what they value. I maybe would just balance it out a tiny, tiny bit, but we'll see what they end up doing in the next couple seasons, because it could all just balance itself out that way, where they decide to invest in that offense, because the offense is going to get a lot of investments from their other guys on the roster. We'll head into our first break here, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into more mailbag questions, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, let me tell you a bit about Shady Rays. And for me, sunglasses are extremely important, and Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. And so that means you get polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. So that means they include a lost and broken protection on every pair. So you get a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happens. So if you leave them on the beach or they are over by your car, it is all covered. If those things happen to me, I'll leave it up to your imagination, but really it is as simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays. Plus, exclusively for our listeners, head to shadyrays.com, use code LOCKEDON to get 50% off of 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON for their best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses, backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you on a Wednesday. Now diving into more mailbag questions, and we'll first here start off with a question from Gunny Ravens, who asks, how much will the Ravens' injuries of this past season influence the draft selection of players for the upcoming season, possibly urging the Ravens to be overly invested in certain positions? And so, yeah, this is a great question. And I think it's going to have a big impact on how they draft, actually. Not to the point where they are solely drafting for the positions where they were clearly injured at, such as offensive tackle, running back, corner, etc. But the Ravens, if they had, the utmost confidence in everything relating to their injuries that they suffered in 2021, you is a team, and not just the Ravens, any NFL, any professional sports organization, you don't know how certain guys are going to respond to those injuries. So you have to, I think, be overly cautious. That's not saying these guys can't come back. That's not saying these guys won't come back, because they are all working very hard. And I have a feeling they will all come back very, very well, but you can't bank on that possibility. So for the offensive tackle position, for example, if Ronnie Stanley was fully healthy, they wouldn't have to invest, I feel like, what will probably be an early to mid-round pick in an offensive tackle, because, again, you just don't know. It's not the confidence level in terms of, oh, well, Ronnie Stanley's never coming back ever, right? That's not what it is. But in the event that doesn't happen, you have to always prepare for the worst, right? And while there's no guarantee the worst happens, there's no guarantee the best happens either. So you have to kind of be a little bit cautious in that area. Offensive tackle is one of those positions where, yeah, the Ravens should invest an early pick in them. I mean, last year the Ravens didn't invest a pick at all at the tackle position. The Ravens, they have said in some press conferences, whether it has been John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta, they've talked about contingency plans with guys on the roster, draft picks, and just how they prepared for that last season compared to what they will probably do this offseason. And I think it has showed, and I think it will continue to show overall. You can also look at the running back position. If the Ravens really didn't have injuries to J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, and those guys were healthy, they might not have to invest in a running back until the later rounds. Now, maybe they still do, right? Because the 3 running back monster that they could create with a very solid mid-round running back would be awesome. But even so, with the kind of rumblings of, well, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards start on the PUP list. Maybe the Ravens take a running back around earlier than they would want to generally because they just need to have that option. Maybe they sign a veteran. I know that's not drafting, but same thing. In the cornerback room, corner's a little bit of an exception because they just have no depth. They have to draft early anyway, and I feel like they are going to draft 2 guys. But with Tavon Young gone, Anthony Averett gone, Jimmy Smith still in free agency, Chris Westry gone, you have to understand that the depth at that position right now, there is pretty much none of it at the moment. So that's an exception to the point where they're going to be drafting corners regardless whether guys are healthy or not there or coming back or not there. So while Humphrey and Peters are both coming off of those injuries, I think at the same time, they just have to draft there anyway. So I think injuries will have a big impact on how they draft. Again, it's not going to completely tank everything. And even the edge position, that's a huge position where, again, the depth isn't necessarily there right now. And part of the reason for that is because Tyus Bowser tore his Achilles. And if Tyus Bowser was healthy right now, do they maybe push that need down a little bit to the second round or something like that? So there are a bunch of different positions that got hit very hard by injuries in 2021. I know everybody watching this who's a Ravens fan understands that. And at the same time, it can have a huge impact on how a team, whether it is the Ravens or someone else, does their free agency plans, does their draft plans. It has an impact. So I think it will have a decently large impact on how they draft, but again, not to the point where they are just scared and drafting 3 corners and 3 tackles and 3 running backs, right? They're going to take best player available. They're going to work the draft board the way they want to work it, but they're also going to be, I feel like at least, they're going to be very, very cognizant of just what's going on with their injury situation and how they can prepare for that best heading into the 2022 season. Our next question here comes from Matthew Seamus, who asks, hey, mailbag question that can't wait for the mailbag. If we decide to draft the top offensive tackle like Ike Ekwonu or Cross, should we trade Ronnie this year also? So the answer to this is no. There's been a lot of conversation about trading Ronnie Stanley, and I just feel like, well, for one, trading Ronnie Stanley right now, we all know the player he is when he's healthy, right? The contract he signed is huge. What happened? He got injured like 4 days before 4 days after he signed that extension against Pittsburgh. I don't know what teams would be willing to trade for Ronnie Stanley right now. I feel like some people have, kind of different scenarios of like what Ronnie Stanley could fetch the Ravens in a hypothetical trade. It's a premium tackle, right? 2 first-round picks in a second. Or some people are saying, well, he's injured. Would a team give up a 6th for him in that contract? I think teams would want to see Ronnie Stanley play healthy first before actually making a move for him, considering how just gruesome and horrible that ankle injury was. And if he's healthy, he's best on the Ravens, right? The Ravens wouldn't want to trade him then. So it's kind of like a thing where if the Ravens draft a guy like Ike Ekwonu or Charles Cross, both would be great selections. I think you use that to your advantage for the Ravens and move one over to right tackle. It would not be Stanley, just a spoiler there. So you can kind of have that work in your favor and do that. What's the willingness of these guys to move over to right tackle? I know Ravens fans are kind of scarred by that after the Orlando Brown situation, and that's fair. But I just feel like trading Ronnie Stanley doesn't really get you anywhere for the Ravens unless you can get a first-round pick for a player is not coming back. And right now, we do not know that at all. He's still recovering. There was a video of him walking like 2 miles on the beach or something a couple days ago. So he is making progress. Trading Ronnie Stanley right now, even if you wanted to trade him for the Ravens, it doesn't get you value in my opinion. So he's staying on the Ravens for right now, in my opinion. Again, crazier things have happened, but I personally would not trade Ronnie Stanley, even if the Ravens do draft a top offensive tackle like Ike Ekwonu or Charles Cross. And next, 2 questions here from Positive Vibes 0611. And he first asked, can we wear the all purples this year? Yeah, let's bring back the all purples, right? Those are such good uniforms. And the Ravens have so many good combinations also. Like, it's incredible the jersey packages that they can put together and the kits that they can put together. I mean, they can do white on black, black on white, purple on black, purple on white, white on purple. I mean, all these different things. And I feel like with what they bring to the table there, some teams just don't have good uniforms, right? Like, it can be an eyesore to watch these teams in uniforms, and you're like, what are we doing here? But the Ravens, they have been very consistent with their uniforms, and I'm very happy that their uniforms look the way that they do. I know people are kind of now pushing or lobbying for the 2 shell rule, which is where you can have multiple shells of the helmet. And I feel like that can really, really be another aspect of what these Ravens can do with their uniforms. But I feel like for right now, I would love the purple on purple just to have those come back, but we'll see what happens with those. Definitely. And then the second question from Positive Vibes 0611. Oh, no, there are three. All right. Well, three questions. The second one being, we had some great primetime games last year, but fizzled out. Now with the offseason and not making any huge moves, what's your over-under on primetime games? Under 3 for me. This is interesting. I'm going to go over 3. I'm going to say 4. I'm going to say 4 if you're talking the over-under at 3. I think the Ravens, the NFL understands how injured they were, and they understand the talent that Lamar Jackson is. And they're not, I feel like they do not want to necessarily take Lamar Jackson off of primetime TV because of how injured and underachieving the team was last season. So I feel like the Ravens, if it's not 5, I think they will have 4. I wouldn't be shocked if they get the full 5. I get, like, look, were the Ravens exciting to watch in the second half of the season? Like, they kind of were, right? The games were close. They were playing good games. And what does the NFL want in their primetime games? Good games, exciting games. And the Ravens played those. It just didn't come out in the Ravens' way. Like, the Ravens were losing the games at the end of the season. They had a great primetime game against the Colts where the Ravens made that huge comeback, right? They had a lot of exciting finishes. The NFL, I think, takes that into account. So I'm going to say the sweet spot for primetime games for the Ravens is 4. I would not be shocked if the NFL gave them 3 and just said, look, we have other teams that we just want to put on more. But I feel like they could get the full 5 because Lamar Jackson is that polarizing of a talent. And that is the pure Lamar Jackson effect. And finally, the last question here from Positive Vibes 0611. Are we keeping Omar's whistle? They should. They should. I think they definitely should. It added to the game day experience. It was a tribute and a really nice one at that. I feel like it just added to everything and was a perfect kind of symbolization of what Baltimore is. And like, it really gave like, it gave chills to a lot of people, myself. And I mean, it was really something special. And to have that happen, I remember the first time they did it too. I mean, it was magical. And just to see everything that went along with it, I think it adds to everything the Ravens do, and they should 100% keep it. We'll see what they do with it, but I feel like they should keep it, in my opinion, at least. We'll head into our final break here, though. When we get back, we'll be rounding out our mailbag episode with more mailbag questions, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, let me tell you a bit about Built Bar. And this time of year, people have given up on their New Year's resolutions, but don't do that this year. If yours is to eat healthy, be sure to do it with Built Bar because actually they are very nice to eat and very good to eat. And plus they have these really cool things called Built Bar Puffs. And if you don't know what those are, I will tell you right now. They are the first ever protein infused marshmallow, which means they're fluffy and marshmallowy, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And I do love chocolate personally, and they are all covered in 100% real chocolate. All the Built Bars are. They contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Plus, they have tons of great flavors. Mint brownie is my favorite, but they also have other ones like coconut almond, and so much more. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're back here, our final 7 of Locked On Ravens here on this Wednesday. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Is Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bringing the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And now let's dive in to our final batch of mailbag questions. And we'll start off with a question from Jose Feliciano. Actually, it's a comment who says, running back that terrible defense. So I understand this comment. I understand it. I personally do not think the Ravens defense is terrible, but I think what Jose is kind of talking about here is look, they're bringing back the same guys. They continue to bring back the same guys every year. When are they going to get something new? Well, they have new guys to kind of put in there and experiment with and play with, because they have Marcus Williams, friend of the show, Marcus Williams, who I think is going to be a phenomenal addition to that defense. They have Michael Pierce, who is kind of like an old/new addition, but he's going to come in there, provide some snaps at the nose tackle position. But then it's like, people are sick of them bringing back Calais Campbell and sick of them bringing back Josh Bynes, just saying, go out there, get somebody new, make the other splash. And it's about value, right? I mean, the Ravens defense wasn't good in 2021. No, it was not good in 2021, but they were missing guy after guy after guy. And it was like, we don't know what this Ravens team is because they literally were playing with like 8th stringers last season in certain positions. And you're like, well, it's a miracle they won all those games at the beginning of the season and were in the top seed of the AFC through 11 weeks. Like, how did they do it? It's like then the injuries it wasn't just like they lost some guys in the preseason and that was it. It was constant, continuous. So, no, the defense didn't play well in 2021. They got better a little bit, but then it was just other issues that popped up, right? First, we were talking about tackling and miscommunications and blown coverages. Then the tackling got a little better, but then they couldn't close in late game situations. So it was a mess for that defense. They didn't have Marcus Peters the whole year. Didn't have Marlon Humphrey the whole year. Not the whole year, but, they didn't have Derek Wolfe for the whole season. Humphrey missed, the back half of the season, not the whole season. But still, you're missing all these talents, and you just it puts a cap on the ceiling of the team because that's the defensive side of the ball. The offense couldn't get anything going in the second half of the season either, which then put the defense on the field more. It just all goes hand in hand. So when you're missing your top two corners, one for the whole season, one for the back half, it throws a wrench in everything. They lost their starting free safety midway through the season. I mean, I understand people wanting new guys to put on this team, new guys to start on this defense. I get it. They've done that, though. So I don't necessarily think they're running back with a terrible defense. I think they're getting guys back on that defense, have added more to that defense, and added a new defensive coordinator as well. So that is also the definition of not running it back. The scheme is going to change a little bit. So I think overall the Ravens, yes, they have brought some guys back. The defense was not good in 2021, but I think it will be better personally in 2022. Finally here, we'll get into a question from Andrew Colvin, who asked, do you think that David Ojabo is a good trade back candidate if the board does not fall to 14 how we would like, or should we take what we get at 14 and see if he falls to us in the second? Well, for me, I'm not taking David Ojabo at 14. I think he is a good trade back candidate. I know a lot of people have proposed the mock trade of the Ravens if there isn't a guy they like at 14, trading back and getting Kansas City's picks, I believe, which are 29 and 30. So 14 and maybe like 100 or one of the fourth round picks for 29 and 30. And then in that situation, you can get a top end talent plus Ojabo. I wouldn't hate that. I think the lowest I would take Ojabo is, or I guess the highest. Well, I don't know. The words are confusing, but the area I would take Ojabo is the second round. The second round is if he's available at 45, I'm running that card in. I'm running that card in because Ojabo is that type of player. So if you decide not to take Ojabo if you're the Ravens, and let's say they make that trade at 29 or 30, and he's there at 45, I'm absolutely making that selection. Is he going to be there at 45? Probably not, to be honest. I think that teams see the potential. I mean, this was a guy who was going to be a top 15 pick at the very latest, right? He was supposed to go in the top 15 at the very latest. Now it's pushing his value down a bit. The Achilles injury, it's not an easy injury to come back from, and it's kind of it has sapped players in the past of their athleticism. It all depends on their recoveries. Again, it can be different for you, different for me. It all depends on the player, the response to the injury, and just how these players come back from it. But I think taking the risk on an Ojabo in a trade back situation, I think that'd be fine. 14 is a pick that they can do a lot with, whether it is trading back, whether it is trading up, whether it is just acquiring more assets with it. They can do a lot with it, and they haven't really had this type of pick before, right? It's always been they're picking in the mid 20s or early 20s or late 20s. 14, it rarely happens they pick in the top 15. It has happened before, but it's rare they have done it over these past really handful of years now. So for Baltimore, with that pick, there is a lot they can do with it. Ojabo is a player that I loved before the injury. I still love him now, but I just wouldn't take him at 14 because I feel like if they do stick with that pick, they need an instant playmaker, star type player who can come in and contribute immediately. Ojabo, unfortunately, is probably not going to be able to do that with his injury, but with the right coaching and the right situation, can become a very, very star-studded edge player. So I like the pick of Ojabo. It's just a matter of where does he fit? Where's the position he's going to get taken on a team? Does a team in the early 20s take a chance on him, right? There are all those different situations. So for me, I think Ojabo was a fine trade back candidate. He'd be somebody that I would love to pair with another top end talent. And that's where I am on the Ojabo situation. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, like the video on the way out if you're here on YouTube, and follow us in audio form as well. I'm going to get back to tomorrow. We'll be diving into more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.